Shosholoza, the South African anti-apartheid freedom song, and it means onward, forward, to victory. We have a soloist, Christopher G. Smith. House choir rehearses on the campus of Antioch College in Yellow Springs, but we have people from Cincinnati, from Middletown, from Xenia, from Springfield, from Dayton, from Urbana, and so come on and join us.
My name is Linda Smith. I'm the minister from that little church in Athens, Ohio. This choir, the musicians, a movement of social justice needs its music, and these musicians have uplifted and filled this room with such great energy. Thank you so much. So I just want to thank you all again for staying on, for doing the social justice work, and also recognizing that we need music, we need inspiration, we need friendship to recharge your batteries and keep on.
50 years ago, I was attending college in Vermont when news came that a white Unitarian Universalist minister from Boston, James Reed, had been killed in Selma, Alabama, where he had joined Martin Luther King in the civil rights struggle. I loaded up my car with outraged schoolmates, and we drove to Montgomery for the final leg of that march led by King. Another UU, a Detroit housewife named Viola Riuso. After the rally, she was shot dead by the KKK while she was driving marchers to the airport for the return flight north. Outraged press reports about the murders galvanized public opinion, and they helped King succeed in his campaign for the critical 1965 Voting Rights Act. Now I want to hear a loud yes I did from everyone here today that just exercised their precious voting rights. Let me hear it. 10 years after that Montgomery March, I became a Unitarian Universalist by joining the fellowship in Yellow Springs, Ohio. So now in doing civil rights work, I invoke the first UU principle, which affirms the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Looking back, I am sad that in 1965, white Americans were more outraged by the deaths of a few white civil rights workers than by the murders of so many more persons of color. I'm glad that now many UUs are working to end the new Jim Crow of mass incarceration. Our first speakers today have done extraordinary work to make clear that Black lives matter. First up will be Demario Cooper, the lead organizer for Stand Up for Ohio, with the Ohio Organizing Collaborative, one of our co-sponsors. Following Demario, Aramis Malachi Torres Sundiata of the Ohio Student Association will report on their efforts to bring justice in the case of John Crawford.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Demario Cooper. I am the organizing director of the Ohio Organizing Collaborative and the lead organizer for Stand Up for Ohio, which is also a part of the Ohio Organizing Collaborative. We are an organization of 18 organizations that came together to improve the lives of regular Ohio. There was a point in time when someone asked a question like, are we winning? Of all the stuff that we've done individually, those 18 organizations, the question was asked, are we winning? And around that table, people said no. We're not winning on the things that are really important to us. And so the OOC was created as an attempt to unify folks to help the regular Ohio. In this room, I know there's some folks who are a little better off economically. There's some folks who are working and able to take care of their family. And then there's some folks who are working and can't take care of their family. Then there's some folks who can't find work at all. A lot of the folks in this society that we found couldn't find work are people who've been formerly incarcerated. Some of them didn't even have to be incarcerated. Some of them just took the plea deal. Some of you don't know, what normally happens is you go to court, you get overcharged by the prosecutor, and then they come with a deal and say, hey, if you take this deal and get this felony for, then you can leave here, you don't have to go to prison. Without telling you that you may not ever find a job to support your family and your life. You might end up living in your grandmother's basement or homeless. My grandmother was from Newport, Tennessee. My family is from the South, like a lot of African American families. We are first, second, maybe third generation Ohioan or Northerner. And my grandmother came here from Newport, Tennessee when she was about 17 years old. 17 years earlier, her father tried to go vote and got killed in a car crash on a bridge. Said that he was hanging on the outside of the car. And, we went and looked up the newspaper report and made sure that it said like 2 times that he was hanging outside the car. We figured that he was probably murdered. Her mom went crazy because she had 7 kids. So my grandmother moved up here trying to find a better life. I'm from Akron, is where she moved. At that time, Akron was the rubber capital of the world. There was a lot of jobs there. There was a lot of access to opportunity. And that's why she moved there. My father, some second generation on my father's side, he actually came up because he threw a rock in the back of the Ku Klux Klan member's car because they called him a nigger. And his mom and his aunts got money together and shipped him out of town before he got lynched. And that's how he ended up in Akron, Ohio. At the same time, there was jobs. He could go get a job and tell some stories about how there were jobs available for people just to walk out and go to another job in Akron. And I think about them moving up here for this opportunity. I think about myself and my son, who's 3 years old now, who won't have those same opportunities. And at the way things are going, he's likely to be killed by a police officer buying a gun in a Walmart. Like, that's possible. That is possible for my son. That is possible for me right now. Or he may be walking down the street in the middle of the street and told to get out that street and murdered and left in the street for 4 hours. I'm running out of time. The one thing that I made sure I wanted to come here and say to y'all, I'm going to say it now. We are in a war. If you are not mistaken, it is that. There are some who know that we're in it and some who don't know that we're in it. And the war is about black lives, whether or not they matter. But it's deeper than that as well. It's more about whether human lives matter. If people really matter, if people are really worth not killing over small crimes, if people are really worth not throwing their lives away for 20 years over selling plants or trying to get money for their kids and buy shoes, is it more important for us to put the jobs inside of prisons, or is it more important for us to put the jobs inside of communities?
Yeah.
I just want to say, as I'm being told to stop, that the people who are going to change this is in this room. We are clearly in a war, and it's not just about race, it's about class. Amen. It's about what kind of world we want to live in. Amen. The OOC is dedicated to improving this world, our peace, Akron, Columbus, Toledo, Dayton, Cincinnati, Ohio. And we hope that you all join us in this moment as we stand up against this mass incarceration system, against this system that's eating black bodies, black babies, black people, humans, that you all join us in this fight. January 22nd, we want to have a mass rally here. Amen. To talk about the policies that's being created, to talk about the prison industry, and to tell them that we're tired and we have to change. And it's more than voting. We have to start taking things over, y'all. Yeah. We have to start taking things over, including the ballot box. But thank you for your time.
Greetings, comrades in struggle. Thank you to Mario for eloquently describing this thing of ours as a war, because we are at war with these systems of oppression that impose themselves upon us. Thank you, Howard, for inviting the Ohio Student Association to discuss our work with the John Crawford case. As you may well know, that John Crawford was a young man walking in Walmart who was shot down by a police officer for holding an air rifle. He was standing there as a citizen of the state of Ohio, a citizen of the United States, and also a citizen of the world. He was standing there, was shot down by an officer named Sean Williams. We got the report from our comrades in Dayton who came to Columbus to discuss this incident. So it's upon us as organizers to organize for this type of event, see, because you can take a moment and make it a movement moment. So what we did as organizers and revolutionaries, we decided to hold state vigils around the state, which included Cleveland, Columbus, and Dayton, where the murder occurred. After those vigils, we found out that the tape was not going to be released. They gave us 3 years. Let's call it the process. 3 years before we could see the tape, so we said, oh no, that ain't good enough. You see. So we decided to go to the AG's office, Mike DeWine, and hold a vigil, and I personally went up to the office and handed him a demand sheet, demanding that we see the tapes. As we organized people, organized resources, 24 hours later, the tapes were released, and the parents were able to see 6 minutes of the film tape. The father of John Crawford said, I just saw my son get murdered by the police. That's true, that's by quote. So we decided as organizers that we are organized, we nationally, to get our comrades from United We Dream, from Dream Defenders, and other organizations within our Freedom Side collective, and decided to do a 12-mile march from the murder site, which is Walmart, to the courthouse where we're convening on the case. Yes, my feet still hurt from that walk, but it was worth it, because what we were able to see is that a conglomerate of people who care about lives were able to come together as a unison and go demand justice for John Crawford. Oh yes, it's beautiful. However, when the courthouse decided not to indict him, we realized the establishment is only concerned with one thing: law and order. That's it. The people have justice. We have morality. The system do not have that. They have law and order. We saw the man standing there with these guns, comparing the air assault rifle with the military arm, saying this is what it is. They said that Officer Williams acted within the law. See, that's how they're able to get away with murder. Because they have these pamphlets and pieces of paper that tell you your life doesn't matter. So after that, the comrades and all of us decided to occupy the police station and ask the chief police to have Sean Williams fired and have charges put against Ronald Ritchie, who was the phone caller that incited a murder. That's what happened. So after we found out that the 3-day occupation that they were not going to do it, we stopped business for that day in Beaver Creek. The lessons that we learned from this is what I said before, is that all they have is law and order. And the only options as a people, as a community, because my life does matter, I should not have to tell you that my life matters. These laws or these actions are for them to realize I'm a human being. You dig what I'm saying? Yes. And Carter always says, if you want to lynch me or kill me, that's not my problem. But if you have the power to lynch me or kill me, then it becomes my problem. And yes, people, it is my problem. Yeah. Because I have students I teach who are 17, 16, who can walk anywhere and be got by the police. I'm telling you the truth. And myself, I can be shot and killed for being who I am. So the only solutions we have is people who care about struggle, people who are in this war, people who believe that justice is not just us. Like Comrade Demario said, we need to take over, because I'm tired of having to give these speeches over and over and over again when these things happen. Organize resources, organize people for power, political institutions for political economic power. That's the only solution we have. And voting is a tactic within our repertoire for revolution. That's how we're going to
it comes from the civil rights movement. Ready? 2 and ain't gonna let nobody, Lordy, turn me around. Turn me around, turn me around, ain't gonna let nobody, Lordy, turn me around. I keep on a-walking, I keep on a-talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let mass incarceration turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let mass incarceration turn me around. Ain't gonna let no drug laws turn me around. Turn me around. Turn me around. Ain't gonna let no drug laws turn me around. Keep on a-walking, keep on a-talking, marching up to freedom land. Gonna let no racism turn me around. I keep on a-walking, keep on a-talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let no violence turn me around. I keep on a-walking, keep on a-talking, marching up to freedom land.
Effective work on mass incarceration for Reverend Wayne Arneson, to be followed by the President of the Columbus NAACP, and the Financial Officer and Board Member of BRIC, Noel Wood.
Unitarian Universalists in Northeast Ohio are involved in trying to shut down a factory. It is a felon factory, a system of racist policies and procedures that have created a hugely disproportionate rate of incarceration for African Americans for nonviolent offenses. Our state has the 7th largest prison population in the nation, and the Cleveland area commits more people to prison than any other region in our state. 41% of those who have been entering prison have been convicted of low-level offenses. A quarter of them are going to prison or back to prison because they've broken probation. What do you think was the largest offense filed by the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office? It wasn't a crime against people, it was a non-violent drug offenses. And African Americans in our county, they are overrepresented in our prison. African American males, 13% of our population. What percentage is incarcerated? 45%. Cuyahoga County is one of the highest counties for African American arrests for marijuana possession. If you're black, you're 6 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession than if you're white. And don't tell me that there are that many fewer white people that are smoking weed. So facts like that have helped create momentum in our county, both for a mass movement and for strategic engagement engagement with power. The mass movement in Cleveland is called Puncher the Silence, and it's inspired by the national leadership of Brother Cornel West and Carl Dix. The strategic accountable engagement strategy is the work of Greater Cleveland Congregation's Criminal Justice Task Force. We have been trying to build relationships with people in Cleveland's power structure, and we determined that the election for the new county prosecutor was the place we had to start. So we turned out, by a factor of 10, the largest public candidate meeting for the county prosecutor candidates, and got promises from them if they won, and we presented our plan for what he needed to do, and we watched what happened in his campaign promises. And I want to quote what he promised. He said he would bring greater efficiency to criminal prosecutions that will enable our system to focus on habitual violent offenders and give qualified low-level offenders a better chance at rehabilitation through alternative programs and expedited proceedings. There's real change there. So we engaged with now newly elected prosecutor McGinty. He needs us as much as we need him. He needs allies in the community to advocate for budget for his office and to be a voice that backs him up when he's engaged with county and state offices that help fund his office. So we've tried to be accountable partners with him as well as challenging partners. We met in mass meeting, and he was held accountable for his campaign promises, and we asked him to refer all cases that can be handled as misdemeanors to the appropriate city prosecutor, and to drop and dismiss all charges for people who enter diversion or probation. And he is being held accountable at another mass meeting to ask him for the statistics and to show how he has acted on these promises. So it is an exciting time and an important time in our county to be involved in a multiracial and multi-strategy challenge to the felon factory, sustaining this new American permanent underclass. The Unitarian Universalists working with Greater Cleveland congregations applaud the community pressure that comes from mass movements, and we continue to be engaged with our strategy, the felon factory system, and bring it down. So we thank you for the support.
Thank you all. Thank you for inviting me. I want to speak to these gentlemen over here before they leave. I am the Chief Financial Officer for BRIG, which stands for Building Responsibility, Equality, and Dignity. I've been introduced as also the President of the Columbus NAACP. I don't need to tell you, gentlemen, how the NAACP has been absent in what's going on. Yes, I'm not going to stand here and lie and pretend it hasn't gone on. So let me say this. One of the reasons why the Columbus NAACP has collaborated with BRIG is because the NAACP on a national level, in Dayton, on a state level, has been absent. Shame on us. But I want you to know, as long as my administration and who follows me, who I support and push up to a leadership role, you will be able to reach out to Columbus, and we will put our organization, our local branch, on the line for you, for us, for our families. I will sacrifice, I have sacrificed my position with the national NAACP because I will continue to fight outside of that structure. That organization, I am sorry to say, it is dying from an internal cancer, but not your local Columbus NAACP. Thank you. Now let's talk about what BRIG and the Columbus NAACP collaborated and did together with regards to mass incarceration. When we started looking at the issue of crime, what our research showed us was that most of the violent crimes are committed by young adults under the age of 25. and their criminal record started when they were juveniles. The Franklin County juvenile justice system was looking for justice in all the wrong places. Lives were being wasted. When kids go through the system, conflicts are not resolved, behaviors are not changed, and relationships are not restored. Not only does this waste lives, but it wastes our taxpayer dollars. As a community, we said it's not okay for 6 out of 10 youth who enter the juvenile justice system to wind up back in the system on even more serious crimes, creating mass incarceration. Crime is more than law breaking. Crime harms victims, offenders, and the community. So if crime is harm, then justice should be healing. When Bread congregations voted to tackle crime and violence in Franklin County, Phase 1 was working with the municipal court on lowering the rate of repeat offending in our community. Judge Herbert from Franklin County Municipal Court made a commitment to work on getting every offender assessed with a screening tool that ensured proper treatment. It was a challenging process for the municipal court, but with hard work, it was done. Today, every probation officer has been trained to use the screening tool. Phase 2 was working with the juvenile court, identifying solutions to reduce repeat offending and lowering the number of kids being locked up. Our research identified 3 areas of focus. 1, consistent assessment for all youth. 2, ineffective treatment agencies. And 3, adequate diversion programs. We pushed for a screening tool, the Ohio assessment system, to be available for all youth and for something to be done about the ineffective agencies which address issues 1 and 2. However, 3 was a little more challenging. Locating a program with a successful track record as it relates to low-risk offenders. First, we held a restorative justice community summit where over 120 people from various organizations, including the Columbus NAACP, congregations, and public officials, came together to learn from national restorative justice experts on what kind of diversion we needed for our youth. From the summit, we identified a solution called Community Restorative Boards or Circles. This solution has been identified as the model of restorative justice that would rehabilitate youth. Community Restorative Justice Circles is a proven approach to diversion that will 1, lower repeat offending, 2, lower the number of minority youth in jails, 3, increase victim satisfaction, 4, get the community involved, and 5, hold offenders accountable in a life-changing way. Community Restorative Justice Circles is a diversion option for low-risk, first-time youth offenders who would otherwise wind up getting caught in the expensive traditional court. Today, by joining with the juvenile court, we are currently reducing the detention of youth and addressing the needs of low-level offenders. That is, several youth that would have been pushed through the criminal justice system have joined the community without a criminal record. The victims have received justice, and all parties have been healed. This is a victory for us all.
We've heard from Cleveland. We've heard from Columbus. Now it's time to hear from Cincinnati.
Yes.
2 returning citizens with the Amos Project. First, Deborah Pennington, helped by Project West, an organization for women, to be followed by Terry Jones, known as TJ, with the HELP project, also from Cincinnati.
Welcome everyone, my name is Deborah, and I represent one of the million returning citizens, with the majority being minority, who's being rejected for adequate employment. Why am I here? Well, because I stand with local organizers and leaders who are pushing for the Ohio Fair Hiring Act. Why? I stand with these leaders simply because I am hopeful for fair chance law reform in Ohio. The Ohio Fair Hiring Act will afford those with blemishes on their background record for a shot at a good job and a decent life. Who here has heard of Ban the Box? Well, the Ohio Fair Hiring Act is our version of Ban the Box for Ohio government jobs. How many people here have ever applied for a state job? Good. Which is key to not resulting to crime or returning to crime. I know you know what I'm talking about, the pre-hiring process of a civil service job. Application, passing the civil service exam, being put on an eligibility list, being interviewed by the relevant department head, then a conditional offer of employment. With that said, let me tell you how the Ohio Fair Hiring Act works. It does two things. One, it removes the question on the job application about an individual's background and delays the background check investigation until later in the hiring process. Two, when the employer does the background check, the decision maker questions the history, takes into consideration the nature of the application, the relevance and direct relationship of the conviction to the job, rehabilitation and good conduct, and the time that's lapsed since the conviction. So I told you how it works. It delays the background investigation and prohibits applicants from being disqualified without relevance. Now I get to tell you about why it's important. The process is dehumanizing. Instead of seeing me like a human being, it sees me as a piece of paper. In 2007, I applied for a civil service job for a clerical position, for which I went through the pre-hiring stages. I applied, passed the exam, was placed on the eligibility list, never interviewed. Therefore, a conditional offer of employment never exists. At that time, I was seeking a BA in Business Administration through Wilmington College. I had worked a 6-month internship at a Fortune 500 company doing clerical work. I am knowledgeable and experienced with administrative and clerical duties. Therefore, the Ohio Fair Hiring Act clarifies the duties and responsibilities of our society as a whole when it comes to fair chance law reform. The act is important because its intent is to eliminate any discrimination against any individual. Help fill the dream of many, like myself, hire on merit. This begins with one step out of our comfort zone. You need to contact your representative, ask them to support this bill. Please call them, maybe even write to them. And if you want, tell them that the law should apply to public sector jobs as well.
Good afternoon, first off, and blessings to everyone in attendance of such an important event. I would like to say I'm truly blessed to give you insight on how I feel about reentry for the state of Ohio and our own cities and communities. My name is TJ. I'm a father of 6, a grandfather of 2 beautiful grandbabies. I am 43 and a 3-time returning citizen. My story is really not that inspirational, for I have been doing advocacy work for 6 years, and during that time, I have been incarcerated for a non-violent offense. And then months after that, I was a victim of gun violence. So I'm blessed to be here to tell you and the newly elected state reps about what reentry programs should look like. Now, I'm not a professional, but I'm a man that sees better ways reentry can work if we collaborate with each other and brainstorm together to fix a broken system. So in 1996, I committed my crime, and I thought to myself, wow, you have done yourself in. But in true sense, that was the easy part, doing the time. I did not realize what obstacles would be following me for the rest of my life. After being released from prison, a prison term of 3 years, I quickly found out the barriers that were pitted against me to fail and keep me in the system. I soon realized if I didn't change my environment, I would soon be back in prison. So I moved away to Alaska. After 2 years, I was back in Cincinnati and back in prison. So I started to hear about how the prison started cutting programs for college and apprenticeship programs to save money. I was mad because a lot of guys in prison really wanted to change. So when I came back home, I was going through the same situation as the first time being released from prison. The difference, this time, I started hearing about reentry programs. I joined one. This program helped me get certified, but it did nothing else. So I was confused. It was funded by the government, yet it's not helping me all the way around. Then I went up to Brother Mike and learned a little more about policies that truly keeps returning citizens from gaining employment from the same reentry programs that they are funding. I was so infuriated by this double standard conservative rule. We started doing a lot of advocacy work to change a lot of the injustice with our organizations around Ohio, but it's still a work in progress. I myself was listening to 91.7 NPR News. In South Carolina, they have the apprenticeship program. That is something I truly believe that Ohio needs today. If we can bring back apprenticeship programs around the state of Ohio, that would not only cut down recidivism, but it would cut down criminal activities, and it would give a guy, a returning citizen, women or men, a different outlook on life itself. They will have a trade. They will be able to get a job that's making at least $15 to $16 an hour. Since hearing this over the NPR News, they have cut their crime rate by 30%. The guys that's coming out of prison in the armed forces that didn't have anything to go to, they are making $16 to $21 an hour. Some of these young men and women are coming straight out of school, straight out of prison, straight out of junior high detention services, and they're making good money while they're going to college. So this is what I truly believe what a new reentry program will look like for Ohio, and hopefully everybody will, back it to the fullest, and we can stay on their neck about bringing something like this to our state, cities, and communities. Thank you for listening. God bless.
Soprano, alto, tenor, bass. Keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Unison and keep on moving forward. We're gonna work for change together. Let's have some harmony and work for change together. Work for change together. Never turning back. Never turning back. We're gonna keep on singing loudly. Harmony and keep on singing. Reach across our borders. Reach across our borders. Reach across our borders. Never turning back. Never turning back. We're gonna stop these wars together. Stop these wars together.
Senator on behalf of Ohioans to stop execution. Worked over 32 years in the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction. He's been a warden at 3 prisons, including Lucasville after the riot in 1993. He's held leadership positions, including agency director, appointed by Governor Taft, reappointed by Governor Strickland. During his career, he witnessed 33 executions as conducted by the state of Ohio. The former director of the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections, Terry Collins.
It's my pleasure to be here to make a couple comments about mass incarceration of 50,813 people. That was the population at DRC Monday. That doesn't count probably 34 to 36,000 people who are under some type of supervision in local community sanctions. 1 out of every 108 adults is incarcerated in the United States of America. I didn't make that number up. I looked it up. It actually mirrored a 2008 report that was put out by the Pew Center that said 1 in 100 people were incarcerated. I marvel when I see him get smarter on crime, because I said that in 2009 before a Judiciary Committee that I was testifying before. When I said that, I got some awful stares from legislators. In fact, one of them said to me, "Well, Director, you telling us we're stupid?" I chose not to comment. But there is some progress being made in reference to mass incarceration. Just this week in California, Proposition 48 was passed that will dramatically reduce their population in their prisons. Many felonies in that state will now become misdemeanors. I supported that and signed on support of that proposition at the request of the Justice Center and the Constitution Project. The Smart Sentencing Act of 2013, which amends mandatory minimum sentences at the federal level. I wish I could say the same about the state of Ohio. I spent the last 18 months of my career working on what was then called Senate Bill 86. I retired in 2010. Roughly 15 months later, that bill was signed into effect. The desire and the goal of that we worked on for a number of years was that lower level offenders not be sentenced in to the Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections. Such offenders as those who fail to pay their child support, theft, drugs, and property offenders. I looked at the 2014 Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction annual report, their fiscal year, July 1st, 2013, July 31, 2014. 20,100 people were committed to prisons in this state during that time period. Of those, 9,199, 45.7%, their figures were commitments of those who were doing the lowest level of felonies, 4th and 5th degree felonies. Of those, 5,700, 5,700, 26% were for drug charges. I said in testimony in 2009, before the department's budget, that we lost the war on drugs. I was ridiculed for making that statement, and lo and behold, about 6 months later, it was in the paper that it was now a national thing that we lost the war on drugs. I'm not ahead of my time, but I can see common sense. I've heard people talk about reentry. Reentry was and is a philosophy and needs certainly a lot of work to be done in this state with jobs and housing and support and ability to have a chance. But it takes a culture change. When is your debt to society being paid? When you get off supervision, when you complete your term and you get off supervision? Unfortunately, most people in this state don't think that your debt to society is ever paid. And we preached that quite often. Now let me move into the topic that I was asked to really speak about, which is the death penalty in the state of Ohio. I did work for 32 and a half years in the Department of Rehabilitation and Correction. I witnessed 33 executions in the state as a result of the various positions I held. I first became involved with the death penalty in 1977 when I went to work at Lucasville, where the death row inmates were housed. And I remember Gary Beeman walking out to prison one morning and never coming back because he got found not guilty and was removed from death row. I was there when we moved John Bird. I walked John Bird from the death house in Lucasville. I actually walked him from death row into the death house and then back out to death row after the United States Supreme Court had given him a commutation that night or stay of his sentence. I was there when we moved death row from Lucasville to Mansfield. I was the person who changed to the one-drug protocol in the state of Ohio back in 2009 or 10. Many people would say to me today and say to me, why has your stance changed? And I tell them, because I don't believe that you should have a death penalty that's based on what county you get arrested in. I don't have to tell you that. You can look at the statistical data and show that. Cuyahoga County has more death penalty indictments than any other county in the state. Fortunately, the new prosecutor there, Mr. McGinty, has certainly changed that. I don't think the system is fair when, depending on what county you're arrested in, depending on what your race is, depending on what your economic status is, can determine whether or not you end up on death row in this state. There's 139 people on death row today. I don't accept the explanation that the worst of the worst get the death penalty. I've been there. I've walked the halls of every prison in this state numerous times. I've worked in maximum security for a total of about 8 years. There's a lot of people who are walking the hallways that are worse than those cases on death row, so I don't buy that argument. We do have the best criminal justice system in the country. We have the best criminal justice system in the world, but it does make mistakes. 6 times in this state, people have been walked off death row that were found not guilty. Derek Jameson, Joe D'Ambrosio, Gary Beeman, to name 3. 146 people. This system does make mistakes. There's too many mistakes that can be made. Most importantly, Ohio has an option. Ohio has a life without parole sentence. That means if you're convicted and given a life without parole, you will never walk the streets again. I've had prosecutors tell me, well, Mr. Collins, there is a chance they can get out. They only can get out if the judge changes the sentence. Life without parole means you're not going to see the parole board, you have no chance for release, you have no consideration for release. Apparently prosecutors like it, because right now today in the system, there's 496 people who are doing life without parole cases. They're currently incarcerated in the state prison system here. That law didn't go into effect until 1996. There's a great number of people of the 139 who sat on death row today who were sentenced prior to 1996, who had no option for life without parole. Roughly 45% of the people who sat on death row today had no option for life without parole. I would surmise that the greatest majority of them would not be sitting on death row if life without parole had been possible. Life without parole is an option that I believe Ohio should use in place of the death penalty. Effect on victims. I've talked to those victims on the morning of execution whose loved ones had been murdered after 10, 15, 20, 25 years waiting. Going through the process of appeals that every time it went to court, they relived that. I've also talked to those individuals whose loved ones was condemned to be executed that morning, and we created another set of victims that morning. So I've been there, I've experienced that. I've experienced that staff who conducts the executions and volunteer to do probably the toughest job in the state of Ohio. I've seen those people sweat, I've seen those people change. The 33 times I was there, and the 33 times I made that trip from my home to Lucasville, the 33 times I talked to that person who was being executed, and I did every one. You'd be surprised, 32 out of 33 said 2 words to me within 15 to 30 minutes of their execution, and that was thank you. Thank you for the way my staff treated them during the previous 24 hours. But I wondered every time, 33 different times, did this system get it right? I don't believe that there was anybody executed who was innocent under my watch. Statistical probabilities probably says I'm wrong with the amount of people that were there, but I know nobody said I'm not guilty. Nobody told me they were not guilty. You also must realize that not guilty and innocent are two different things when it comes to the death penalty. You can be released from death row if you're not guilty, but you can't get any monetary value because you weren't considered to be innocent. So I can put you in prison for 22 years, I can put you on death row, and I can let you out and say you're not guilty, but because I can't prove you were innocent, you have no right to any monetary value. So I've asked and said publicly that we do away with the death sentence in Ohio, along with other people. Justice Pfeiffer, who was the senator who was involved in writing the death penalty law in this state, has come out against the death penalty. I do believe that life without parole is a punishment that is certainly frequently used now. It offers justice that is swift, certain, effectively severe, and perhaps offers more sensitivity to the victim's healing. I understand it's an emotional issue and we have to look at facts. There was a task force that was recently put together by the Ohio Supreme Court, Chief Justice O'Connor. They made 56 recommendations. Hopefully that those recommendations will be looked at by the House and the Senate in this state. I'm not as optimistic as some that they will be. There are two on there that I say should be done without hesitation, without reservation, without hearing, and with immediate expediency. And one of those recommendations is that we should not execute anybody in the state or indict anybody in the state who is severely mentally ill. One of those recommendations also was to the victim's family. We shouldn't have hesitation about that. Shouldn't have committee hearings, pass the bill, and move forward with it. I was in awe when I read the papers this week. I still keep up with what goes on in the world of prisons. And the headline out of a paper said, "Death penalty changes among legislation to be passed in lame duck state house leaders say." Apparently they had this big confab and they said what they were going to do between now and the first of the year. And I'm going to quote this because it's exactly what was said in the paper about the death penalty, that they're going to pass legislation to address the concerns with Ohio's lethal injection method. And here's what was said. That is something we cannot leave in abeyance, otherwise we're going to have people pass away prior to execution. That quote is directly attributed to the Speaker of the House, Mr. Batchelor. I'm going to leave you with one other thing. Cards that can be sent to various leaders, but ask that the death penalty in Ohio be stopped. We have options. Life without parole is that option. Thank you.
In the words of James Weldon Johnson's great anthem, it's time to lift all our voices and let Ohio ring. Take out your program. The back page is a commitment form. And make a commitment to do something about what has fired you up today. Take a look at the inside of the program. What they need to hear. The Fair Hiring Bill has been introduced and the number is HB 654. We need to tell our elected representatives to get behind it. There will be a bill introduced and rushed through this lame duck session by December to bring back the death penalty in Ohio that is now barred because of the federal court order against lethal injections. Are preparing legislation that would grant anonymity to any drug company that provides the pharmaceuticals used in lethal injections, and we would not know the name of the drug being used. Secret executions. The bill would grant immunity to any medical professionals who participate in executions. That violates the code of the American Medical Association. Ohio is going even farther than other states that have adopted this kind of measure where courts have been striking them down. We need to wage a public opinion campaign with letters to the editor. We need people to send emails to their lawmakers. Better yet, to go see them in person and tell them that you are committed to get smart on crime. Whether it is just your support for the Fair Hiring Bill, whether it is your opposition to this secret executions bill, or the terrible bill 251 in the House that will roll back the reforms that were just made 2 years ago. Fourth and fifth degree felonies were no longer supposed to resort to incarceration. The prosecutors are unhappy with that. They want to go back to the old system. So what are you going to do next week? We're going to close with a UU favorite by the World House Choir, Standing on the Side of Love.